2020. I'm Maria Haug, Board President. I would like to take a minute to discuss the format of tonight's meeting. Tonight we are conducting a hybrid board meeting with some trustees attending in person, others by Zoom. All action items this evening will require a roll call vote. Additionally, members of the public were asked to provide comments via telephone or email. Public comment for this meeting was closed on May 13th, 2020 at 5 p.m. After each agenda item, I will ask if public comment was provided. A list of detailed instructions for providing public comment is available on our website. Would like to introduce my fellow trustees through roll call. When you hear your name, please respond with here. Lisa Pelosi.
Here.
Julio Oguin.
Here.
Jeannie Kerr.
Here.
Jeff Conwell.
Here.
Joe Brody.
Here.
I would also like to introduce our district staff attending in person. Superintendent Dr. Mary Lou Wilson. Chief Academic Human Resources Officer, Mr. Christopher Heller. Chief Business Official, Ms. Andrea Stubbs. Executive Assistant to the Superintendent and Governing Board, Ms. Erica Madrigal. And our IT Systems Assistant, Mr. Derek Machado. We are delighted that you are viewing on Channel 27 or our YouTube channel. A copy of this board meeting video will also be available on our website at www.santolinaunified.org. Item 2, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
As many are in favor of the adoption of the resolution will, as their name is called, answer aye. Those opposed will answer no. Dr. Wilson will call the roll.
Trustee Browdy?
Aye.
Trustee Conwell?
Here.
Aye.
The response would be aye or
Aye.
no. Thank you. Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye. Motion carried. Next, item 3 is the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll be standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. There is a flag on our website. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Did any members of the public submit comments on items not on the agenda?
There were no comments submitted.
On to item 5A, communications. Each month, a member of the Santolina Teachers Association will provide a verbal or written update to the Board of Trustees on topics not on the agenda. So we have a YouTube message from Mr. Brandon Farrell, the SHTA president.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to submit my SHTA report through a video message, trying to be revolutionary, but I'm not sure if this qualifies as being revolutionary or not. But we've endured quite an ordeal here in our country and in the world. Obviously we're focused on what's happening here in Santolina. I want to open my message from my SHTA report, thanking all of our teachers and their ability to adjust so quickly. I think we mentioned that in the last board meeting, but since the last board meeting, even more transitional things have been done in cooperation with our district and site leadership and administration. We'd like to shout out to Andy Stubbs first because, budgetary concerns are among some of the issues that my members are concerned about. And we had a budget meeting with Mr. Heller, Miss Avina, and Miss Stubbs, and I can tell you that I was thoroughly impressed with the work and the thoroughness that she was able to do, in terms of the budget assumptions and the final 1920 into 2021 budget. I know that, things are going to be in flux, as we go forward, but very confident in Andy's numbers and how that materialized in this last week as she delivered that message to both Christina and myself. And we'll be communicating that to our members. Also want to highlight a couple leadership things, from my perspective that I've been working on with Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller has done a tremendous job of listening to our teaching, needs and concerns. We've been doing voluntary feedback meetings, and many of the questions that my members have for those meetings are being answered, in great detail by Mr. Heller and Miss Dr. Wilson. So we are eternally grateful for the messaging of what's being done at the district level to provide for the teachers here. Just also staying the course. We've been able to create a plan, stay the course, and create a system where we can contact the parents that are having some trouble with their own kids being able to get some of the work done. But we have much work to do. Concerns that I have going forward for my members are quite a long list. Each of those items, I believe, have been carefully thought out by Mr. Heller and our principals. I think they're in constant communication with our staff members and our teaching staff. Our teaching staff is very anxious about how this will look in the fall. We know that we're going to be faced with even more difficult challenges as we come back to school. I think that, to the best of our ability, we would love an opportunity to prepare for those challenges once we get some set guidelines about how that's going to work. But that's really the first and foremost on my mind. How are our teachers going to be able to get the correct preparation going forward, as our plan will certainly change and develop over the course of the summer months leading up to next school year. I have other concerns, around just being able to manage the students, what it looks like for our TK5 students as they come into the new school year. They are not creatures that adapt well to changing environments. I think that first and foremost, those age level of kids really need stability, and anything we can do to manage and create stability for that group of kids is going to go a long ways. And I believe that we will create a plan that will allow us to do that if restrictions are allowed for our kids to come into school every day. So that's really my hope. Like I said, I was very impressed with our latest budget meeting that we had given to us by Ms. Stubbs and Mr. Heller. I've been in constant communication with our Chief Academic and Human Resources Officer. Things are moving along, albeit by a snail's pace, but rightfully so because of the types of restrictions that we're being given. All I can say is I hope that we're afforded the opportunity to prepare properly as we go forward into the next school year, into the end of this school year. I hope that our community understands how hard our teachers have been working, and I appreciate the time to be given this video message to submit as my report. Thank you very much, and we will see you very soon, I'm sure.
Thank you to Mr. Farrell. On to the superintendent's report, item 5C.
Yes, good evening. I am very pleased to report that Mr. Cinto and I met with Dr. Reluccio this week and shared with her graduation for our high school seniors plan. And it's truly because of the level of control, timing, and precaution that we believe our plan was approved. While I don't have all of the details at this time, what I can tell you is that our plan affords each family to individually see their student have their name called, receive their diploma, and have photos taken. We're really excited about this effort. All of that, along with pre-recorded speeches, will be put together in a video and available for all of our families to view. Really exciting news, and a huge thank you to Mr. Cinto for his thoughtful, detailed plans. More information will be coming from the high school very soon to help the high school seniors to understand the next steps. Also wanted to let you know that Olay Health will be distributing groceries in our parking lot tomorrow for any families. Beginning at noon, they'll have approximately 600 bags of groceries and pet food, and they will stay until the last bag is distributed. Again, very exciting for our families and our community. Remind you all that our food services continues to provide breakfast and lunch for any child under the age of 18 on Mondays and Thursdays. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. We have written reports from the high school, RLS, elementary school, and the primary school. I'd like to thank all of our principals for preparing the reports, as well as all the hard work that they're doing at this time. Next, we have item 6A, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent? I'm sorry, Ms. Madrigal, was there any public comment on the consent agenda?
There was no public comment.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as written?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Wilson, can you call the roll?
Yes, Trustee Browdy,
Aye.
Trustee Conwell,
Aye.
Trustee Kerr,
Aye.
Trustee Olguin,
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi,
Aye.
Trustee Haug.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7A, student learning and achievement. We'll be calling on Mr. Christopher Heller. Ms. Madrigal, was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Thank you.
Right. Yep.
Yes.
Good evening. In tonight's agenda, the board will receive information related to Governor Newsom's executive order. This is tough, which modifies the adoption of the local control accountability plan for this year. In normal years, tonight would provide a public hearing of a new plan and a related budget. So on the screen, hopefully you can see, this is the new timeline. This was developed by Lucy Pearson Edwards of the Napa County Office of Education, and I think it captures the information perfectly. On May 1st, the CDE released the guidance and direction on this COVID-19 operations report. This report will be completed by district staff to present to the board at the June meeting. This will highlight a lot of the work that we've completed related to the COVID closure and the educational plan that we've developed to support that. The LCAP for this upcoming school year 2021 will be due on December 15th, 2020. And it will be a one-year plan, and it will be approved by the county in January of 2021. This LCAP for 1 year will most likely look like the LCAP that we have in place currently and have a few modifications within it. Any changes that we have made do align with the budget that Ms. Stubbs will present to you later. In developing the LCAP this year, or in the upcoming year for the 2021 through 2024 cycle, that will be a 3-year plan that will be presented in May of 2021 for adoption for a 3-year cycle. This is very challenging to speak like this. Sorry. I'm going to take this off. Can I do that? I'm going to talk like this. So in essence, you will receive a report in June that highlights the COVID. There will be a 1-year LCAP that's in place for the upcoming school year. And then in May of 2021, we will have an adopted or present a 3-year LCAP for consideration and public hearing to be adopted in June of 2021 for 3 years. Any questions there?
Sorry, board members, any questions?
No, I
Julio, Lisa?
No questions. Thank you.
I'm going to just inform you when board members here are shaking their heads, I will try to let our other board members know since there is no visual sight. Okay? So there were no questions. Julio, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heller.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 7B, the Spanish report on the St. Helena High School Spanish program. I would like to remind the board this is a written report, and I would like to thank our high school principal, Mr. Cinto, for preparing such an exhaustive report. Was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Board members, trustees, do we have any questions about this agenda item?
No question. I too was very appreciative of a very thorough report. It was great to have all those numbers and stats. So thank you to Mr. Cinto.
Julio?
No questions.
Okay, and I did see Mr. Conwell and Ms. Kerr shaking their heads. There are no questions. We will move on to item 7C. California Interscholastic Federation Annual Report from St. Helena High School. I would like to again remind the board that this is a written report. Ms. Madrigal, was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There were no comments made by the public on this item.
Do the trustees have any questions about this agenda item?
No questions.
And we have no questions here. Both board members have shook their heads no. I'd like to just thank again the staff who put together the report. I'm sure that it was, again, our athletic team along with the administrative staff at the high school. Thank you. Next, we have student learning and achievement, item 7D. Consideration of grades 6 through 12 science curriculum adoption for implementation in the 2020-2021 school year. We'll be calling on Miss Mary Allen.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, board members and members of the public. So for this whole year, we have been piloting science materials at the TK through 12th grade level. We first started out with attending a science fair put on by Napa County Office of Ed, where several publishers came and talked about their instructional materials. We selected 3 particular publishers to hear additional information on at the lower grades, TK5, and then 3 additional ones from the 6th through 8th grade. After that, we had those publishers come and give us a little more detail on their programs. And then from that point, we selected 2 to actually pilot in our district. Due to the planned power outages in October, as well as the COVID-19, the TK5 pilot still needs to happen and proceed into fall of 2020. We're just not done there, and they're not ready to make a recommendation. And they've been using those materials during the COVID-19 shutdown, but we still need to continue on until they feel very comfortable with the piloted material and they can make a recommendation. 6th through 12th grade feel comfortable with the materials that they've been piloting, and that's what's being brought to you tonight. So we're asking for a recommendation for approval after a 30-day review for the Amplify Science program, 6th through 8th grade, and at the high school for chemistry and physics, it would be the Pasco Science. Both of these are next generation science standards materials, and I have to say they're blended where they're computer online textbooks as well as hard copies, and they're wonderful materials. I've reviewed them myself. I've also sat in on each one of the presentations about the materials. I'm thrilled with the recommendation that the teachers are bringing forward, and I have to thank the teachers. This is a lot of work to pilot materials, and it's not an easy process. There's a lengthy evaluation that they need to fill out, and it has to apply to, is this acceptable for all students? Is it applicable for all students? Does it meet ELs? Does it meet special ed? Is it easy for the students to understand? Is it user-friendly for the teacher? There's so many requirements in our evaluation process, and I'm pleased that the teachers came up with these recommendations. Any comments?
Was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Thank you. Trustees, any questions?
No questions for me.
Both board members here have shaken their heads no. Julio, any questions?
Quick question, Mary Ellen. So the TK through 5th, that would be approved until next year around this time, or are they going to take the most of the year to see if they like it, or are they going to decide to do that earlier?
They're going to decide that early. They've been piloting for half of the year. They're just not feeling comfortable enough to make a recommendation between the two. They want to start out the year, the fall, and I anticipate that we'll have a recommendation coming up in November.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question, how the 30-day review will look like in our current situation. Normally we have the textbooks available here at Vintage Hall for community members to review. Is that still?
Yeah. Yes, Maria. There will be something going out on the district website. There will actually be a public comment to where they'll have access to the links of the textbooks, and then they can send any public comments to me for the next, I think it's 30 days prior to our June 9th board meeting.
Thank you. Any further
Thank you, Mary.
questions?
You're welcome.
Just to clarify, the board meeting in June is the 18th, so we will have ample time.
Thank you. So thank you, Mary Ellen. On to agenda item 8A. That is the adoption of Resolution 19-20, Pride Month, June 2020. I would like to call on Joe Brody.
Right. Hello, trustees, district faculty, and members of the public. I am really excited to finally bring this fully drafted, fully vetted resolution for potential adoption. The idea to look into a Pride Month resolution, we started playing around with it at the beginning of the year and have went through a very long, carefully calculated process to be able to bring it here tonight. It started just as an idea being bounced back. It was then brought to several student groups to get student input, because that's where this was really rooted, was in student opinion. What do students care about? What do students want to see? So it started at the student council at the high school, was then brought to the GSA, which is the Gender and Sexualities Alliance at the high school. From there, gathering student input, student opinions, that was all brought to the Equity, Culture, and Climate for the green light to start drafting a resolution. And then, along with Trustee Pelosi, President Haug, and Dr. Wilson, we came up with this final draft to present for potential adoption tonight. And again, I just want to say that I'm really proud of all the work that the four of us have done as a team, but then all of the students, all of the teachers, all the community members who came together to bring this to the board tonight.
Thank you, Joe. Joe, would you feel comfortable reading the board, the resolution 19-20?
Of course. All right, so this is the St. Unified School District resolution number 19-19, Pride Month 2020. Whereas the vision and mission of the St. Helena Unified School District promotes a safe, supportive, and inclusive learning environment where all students can fully develop as resilient, caring, and responsible individuals and citizens. And whereas the St. Helena Unified School District celebrates diversity in students, staff, and the school community. And whereas the district is firmly committed to providing a safe, nurturing, and tolerant environment in our schools. And whereas the district is firmly committed to school safety for all students, staff, and family members, including the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, or LGBTQ+ community, or those who may be perceived as such. And whereas Board Policy 514.3 prohibits discrimination in its programs and activities based on gender or sexual orientation, among other characteristics. And whereas June is a symbolic month in which LGBTQ+, their families, friends, and allies come together in various celebrations of freedom and pride. Therefore, be it resolved, the St. Helena Unified School District proclaims the month of June 2020 to be LGBTQ Pride Month and will honor and highlight the accomplishments and contributions of LGBTQ students, staff, and their families. Pride Month is an avenue to ensure that bullying, harassment, and discrimination based on real or perceived orientation, gender identity, and gender expression is deemed unacceptable in our community. Be it further resolved, by recognizing Pride Month, the district continues to support all other policies, practices, and curricula that honor and respect LGBTQ+ students, staff, family, and the greater community.
Thank you, Joe. Was there public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Trustees, are there any questions about this agenda item?
No.
No questions. I just am very happy to have this come to us this evening. It's great. I too want to commend the collaboration. And Joe, I really want to commend you for taking the time to work with the students, because I know that took a lot of your time. And I want to just thank you for all that hard work that you did. This is a direct result of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thank you again, Joe. I really enjoyed working with you on this. It was, like Lisa said, it was really above and beyond in effort, along with all of your schoolwork, to put all the meetings and feedback together. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve resolution? I'm just going to ask for clarification on the actual number of the resolution.
It is 19-20.
Okay, so we do have a typo in one of the in the actual text of the resolution that will be modified. So this is adoption of resolution 19-20. Do I have a motion to approve it as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Wilson will call the roll.
Yes, thank you. Trustee Browdy?
Aye.
Trustee Conwell?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi?
Aye.
Trustee Haug.
Aye. Motion carried. We have a lot of work for you tonight, Joe. Again, we're going to be calling on you for item 8B, adoption of resolution 19-22, the St. Helena Unified School District Green Initiative, Reduce, Reuse, and Recycle. Joe Brody.
All right. So again, very proud to bring this green initiative, Reduce, Reuse, Recycle, to the board. For members of the public who are not familiar with the green initiative, it was originally passed in 2015 under the guidance of a former student representative, Jack Preston. It was that 5 years later, it would need a little bit of an update. So in January, I reported to the board that we would be reevaluating the Green Initiative following 3 guiding questions. 1, did the Green Initiative continue to serve students in the district? 2, did we want to consider adding language addressing climate change? Or 3, do we draft a separate document to address climate change? So through all the work that we did, I was able to meet with, again, student council at the high school. I was able to meet with the leadership class at the RLS, was really excited to bring a whole mix of students into it, was also able to keep in contact with the Environmental Activism Club at the high school, and was able to bring it for a final stamp of approval to the Student Congress at the high school, which is a group of 40-some students from all different corners of the campus coming together to grapple with student issues. And then similarly to the Pride Initiative, it was brought to the Equity, Culture, and Climate Superintendent Subcommittee to see if there were any outside thoughts as well. And so looking back at our guiding questions, 1, to answer question number 1, yes, the Green Initiative does continue to serve students. And 2, we have added new language, kind of beefed it up a little bit, as it were. I'm really excited to show that St. Helena Unified School District, that going green and being environmentally friendly has always been a priority, but to be able to see the students engage with this material and to be really excited to be able to bring it back to the board is amazing. This is something that students are really passionate about. And the district, by acknowledging that, is really showing that they care. And so I really, on behalf of all the students for both of these initiatives, but specifically going back to this green initiative, that the district really is here to listen and is here to serve the students.
Thank you, Joe. Was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Joe, would you be willing to read the resolution 19-2022?
Of course. So this is the St. Helena Unified School District resolution number 19-22. The St. Helena Unified School District Green Initiative, Reduce, Reuse, Recycle. Whereas the St. Helena Unified School District recognizes the impacts of climate change on students' lives, we support and encourage reduce, reuse, recycle programs, actions, and practices within the St. Helena Unified School District. The staff and students remain committed to work with the greater community for sustainable advancements in the areas of waste, water and energy usage, and environmental education. Be it resolved that to promote healthier, more environmentally sustainable schools and teach environmental leadership, the school board hereby calls on the district to develop appropriate measures in the following areas. 1, that school sites develop site-specific committees that include students, staff, and community members to oversee, monitor, and implement site-specific programs with specific goals which measure progress. These sustainable programs may address recycling and energy conservation, water conservation, school gardens, and composting. Open lines of communication between sites is encouraged to align programs, actions, and practices. 2, to integrate a TK-12 environmental education curriculum within state standards that may include field trips, school gardens, being there experiences, and guest speakers. 3, that the district regularly researches opportunities to introduce solar power, green energy solutions, and other environmentally friendly technologies on campuses as advancements are made in these areas. 4, that student, parent clubs, and community organizations connected with the schools are encouraged and supported in efforts to raise money through recycling programs or to raise awareness through activities and events. 5, the efforts are increased to use classroom and maintenance supplies that are non-toxic and or recycled and are environmentally friendly. Chemicals containing glyphosate will not be used. 6, that the Green Initiative, Reduce, Reuse, Recycle, will be posted on the district website. Site committee goals and objectives may be made public on school websites. 7, that the district identifies private and public funding to encourage and support environmentally sustainable programs and activities. Therefore, be it resolved that the district shall report annually to the board on the state of these causes within the district and work with school sites to develop plans for sustainable solutions. Moreover, this resolution calls on the district to continuously consider environmentally conscious opportunities when pursuing new projects and/or capital improvements.
Thank you, Joe. Trustees, any comment on this agenda item?
Take a drink of water, Joe. That was a lot of reading. Great work once again. I mean, thank you. We did sit in on President Haug and Dr. Wilson and I sat on the round table, if you will, at the RLS, and Joe's a true leader, and he did great work on this. So, congratulations and thank you again, Joe.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Joe. Trustees. Trustee Conwell and Trustee Kerr shook their heads no, that they did not have further questions. Julio, do you have any questions or comments?
I just wanted to also congratulate Joe on both resolutions. I've seen him in a couple of meetings in action, and he is a great leader. So he's very charismatic, and I enjoy all the work that he's doing, and being able to connect with our students is important as well. Getting that feedback and then bringing that back. So just thank you for all the work that you're doing. And then on the district end, just also enjoy seeing, that we're really working with all our grades to implement a lot of these, green initiatives, and teaching the younger kids, because that's ultimately who is, as they get older, are going to be more proactive as far as protecting the earth. So I want to just commend the district as well for putting that through all grade levels and allowing our students to learn that in school.
Thank you, Julio. Any other comment? Is there a motion to approve the adoption of Resolution 19-22 as presented?
I'm happy to make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Wilson will call the roll.
Yes, Trustee Browdy.
Aye.
Trustee Conwell.
Aye.
Trustee Kerr.
Aye.
Trustee Olguin.
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi.
Aye.
Trustee Haug.
Aye. Motion carried. Moving on to item 8C. Final review of the CSBA governance self-assessment tool criteria and timeline. So, first of all, we're going to be engaging the CSBA, or the CSBA has a governance self-evaluation tool. And now is the time where we get to discuss whether we're going to use that tool. The self-evaluation process, we agreed at the April 2 board meeting that we were going to be using the tool. So now we're going to be basically starting the process and reaching out to CSBA. And we'll have a 2-week period to complete the self-evaluation, and that will be starting on tomorrow. So I would like to see if, first of all, was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Okay. And trustees, do we have any comments or questions?
my comment would be that I feel very comfortable with this tool. We've used it in the past, and I'm very happy that we're doing this. And I believe that the 2-week period is certainly long enough, as long as myself, that I don't wait till the last minute to do it.
Julio or Lisa, do you have any questions or comments?
Go ahead, Julio.
All right, I had a quick question. So, as far as the timeline, so once we do the survey through that 2-week period, are we gonna be meeting as a board to discuss the survey like we've done in the past within a short, shortly after, or what's the timeline on that look like?
I do believe that it's always better to have a short turnaround, and that we discuss it as soon as possible after we take the evaluation. We would have to find a time to have that evaluation. The way it's set up now, we could possibly have a discussion at the June board meeting. Would that work with the schedule, Dr. Wilson?
Yes, we could hold a discussion at the June 18th board meeting if you choose.
Okay, so that's one option. Another option would be to discuss it. We did talk about later this year going over our governance handbook. We could revisit it then as well, but then we would have a certain time lag. So I'm looking for everyone's comments and feelings about this, whether you would like to have it with the June board meeting or with the review of the governance handbook later, with its own session later in the year.
I'm going to chime in and say that I think we should do the self evaluation at the June meeting. I don't think it would be great to wait until fall. I have been reviewing the handbook as you requested as my nighttime reading. So I think that is good to keep that separate in the fall. That's my 2 cents.
And I'm not in my head with that because I agree with that as well. I think it's just because I think we have in the past delayed it a bit, and then it makes it more difficult as far as the discussion points. So I would want it to have it earlier as well.
I agree as well. June would be a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I also feel that June is better. Often I find that when there is the big lag, I forget what I've written and I don't remember what my comments are sometimes. And the sooner that we have it after our actual evaluation, the better. So we'll be adding that to the June board meeting. So moving on to Item 8D, this adoption of Resolution 19-23. This is the alternative evaluation and grading policy for grades TK-12 for the 2020 spring grading period. And I'll be calling on Dr. Mary Lou Wilson.
Yes, thank you, President Haug. During the April board meeting, we did bring that emergency resolution to the board to allow the superintendent to move forward with emergency procedures. And while we absolutely included the piece around changing the environment for student learning, and we talked with you in detail about the grading process, we did not include it in the resolution. So this is a very detailed resolution, and I'm not going to read it in its entirety. What it is allowing for is the modification of grades for the COVID-19 event. Primary and elementary students will not be receiving grades or marks. They'll be receiving feedback from their teachers, and that has already begun. And then in our middle school and our high school, students will be receiving a credit, no credit. And you all know that the UC systems are support this notion, and at this time I recommend approval of Resolution 1923.
Ms. Badrigal, was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Trustees, are there any questions about this agenda item?
I had just one question, and I think it's just more for curiosity is, how does that impact our students that may want to apply to colleges that are not UC or CSU? Do we have definitive information on that, on if the credit, no credit would it impact their application process?
Chris, I can help you with that if you want me to respond or if you'd like to respond.
Go ahead, Mary.
Lisa, it's actually being approved by several states, not just California. So the no credit is happening across the United States.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I did have a question, but that was my question as well, as whether if there was an option of having a grade, but it sounds like it's going to be credit or no credit, and that's kind of going out pretty wide, nationwide.
So is there a motion to approve the adoption of Resolution 19-23 as presented?
I'll make that resolution.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Wilson will call the roll.
Trustee Browdy?
Aye.
Trustee Conwell?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye. Motion carried. So next we're moving on to item 9A, Human Resources, consideration of approval for the 2020-21 Declaration of Need. I'd like to call on Mr. Christopher Heller.
Great, thank you. Each year at this time, we are asked to file this declaration of need for short-term credential waivers with the Napa County Office of Education in the event that we may need teachers who do not possess a credential. Although we don't foresee this occurring since all of our teachers are fully credentialed, the declaration of need provides us with flexibility with the California Teaching Commission with estimates and positions in case needs arise. So I would ask that we approve that this evening.
Ms. Madrigal, was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
And trustees, do we have any questions or comments?
I do not.
And both trustees here are shaking their heads no. Julio or Joe, any questions?
I'm good. Thank you.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the 2020-2021 Declaration of Need as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Wilson will call the roll.
Because this is a personnel issue, Joe Browdy will not be voting on this item. Trustee Conwell?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye. Motion carried. Next, we have item 9B. The Board of Trustees will be asked to approve the third contract, a third contract amendment for Dr. Mary Lou Wilson, Superintendent. This third contract amendment will extend Dr. Wilson's terms of employment through June 30th, 2024. And we will be discussing changes to the superintendent's salary at the August board meeting. Was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Trustees, do we have any questions or comments?
No questions.
I have a comment I'd like to read. I am very pleased that a 3-year agreement has been reached. If it were up to me, I would make it a 10-year agreement to keep our superintendent and executive cabinet. I believe the success in the last 4 to 5 years of our students directly correlates to the superintendent's talents and the focus on every child while providing constant guidance and holding staff accountable. Dr. Wilson is the reason why our district is excelling even at a time when online instruction compared to other, even when online instruction is compared to other districts. I'm going to vote no on this agenda for one reason, and it's because the last section of Section 3, and I'll read it. It says, at August 2020 regular board meeting, the Board of Trustees, the superintendent's salary shall be negotiated in good faith between the Board of Trustees and superintendent with the approval of the Board of Trustees. A little background. In August of 2019, the board approved a 3-year salary increase for the Santolina Unified Teachers Association. In November 2019, the board approved the same 3-year salary for the CSEA and non-management positions. And in March 2020, the board approved the executive cabinet salaries. All of these employee raises were with an effective date of July 1st, 2019. The board has given a raise to every employee in the district except for one, the superintendent. The board, to me, is just kicking the can down the road. As happy as I am about the extension of the superintendent's contract, it does not override the fact that we are not negotiating her salary in a timely manner. So I will be voting no.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions from trustees?
No questions.
Julio?
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking for clarification on this as far as what Jeff just read, as far as what he wants to do with voting no. I mean, what would it be?
The reason why I'm choosing to vote no is because I believe that we should be negotiating the salary currently, and we should hopefully complete it by the fiscal year end. So that's my hope, is that we would do this in a timely manner while it's all in 2019 rather than to wait till the following year and putting it in a contract saying we're going to do something. It doesn't bode well with me. So that's the reason why I'm voting no on that.
So by voting no, it would be to approve it before the end of this fiscal year is the reasoning.
I would much approve that if we change the language in the second one, that basically no later than August 2020, and that we would do everything practical to have it completed in the current fiscal year. To me, it would make a lot of sense for the budget as well, because next year we're gonna, if there's a retro payback, then it comes out of next year's money, not this year's money. And we did just get a very nice tax increase from the for the district because of the property taxes. And so to me, it all seems like it's the right time to do something between this current fiscal year and not push it off till next year.
Any other questions or comments from the trustees? Jeannie, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay. So is there, what I'd like to see now, if there is anyone who is willing to make a motion to approve the third contract as written, as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
So then all those in favor of the contract amendment as presented, Dr. Wilson will call the roll.
Trustee Conwell.
No.
Trustee Kerr.
Aye.
Trustee Olguin.
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi.
Aye.
Trustee Haug.
Aye. Motion carried. And I just want to, in addition, I didn't comment. I wanted to thank you, Mary Lou, I'm sorry, my microphone was off. I wanted to thank you, Mary Lou, for your guidance. And I'm really, as board president, I'm really happy that we're going to have a steady hand at the helm over this next difficult time of the next 3 years. We couldn't get through this without you. Thank you very much. On to item 10A. Facilities update is a written report. Was there public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Do the trustees have any questions on this agenda item?
No, just, business is moving along. It was a sign of, to read that, I kind of felt it was like, you see that things are moving forward. Work is being done even in this chaotic time. So kudos to Andy and the district and Joe Perez for working on all those items. That's a lot going on there. So thank you.
Thank you. And any questions from you, Helio? And Joe?
No questions.
No questions.
And Trustee Conwell and Trustee Kerr shook their heads. So we'll be moving on to item 11A, which is the fourth board review of the 2020-2021 SHUSD budget assumptions. I'd like to call on Ms. Andy Stubbs.
Thank you. And we do have a few changes since the board saw this during the last board meeting, and so I'd like to go through it. And I'd like to draw your attention to a few highlighted items. And so first of all, on page 1, under property tax revenue, we do have a highlighted section there. And what I've done with the budget assumptions is added some verbiage every time that there's something related to the COVID-19 event. And so here, with regard to a property tax revenue, we indicate that 3% is still a safe estimate on property tax growth for 2020-21 based upon discussion with Napa County agencies. And then during our budget presentation in an item later this evening, we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in terms of our property taxes. And then the next highlighted area I'd like to draw your attention to would be on page 2. And this is something else we'll be covering a little bit later also. Under other state funds, you see that we've got a comment about the COVID-19 event in relation to some state funding that we receive. And so we could see something happening there in terms of some reductions, which won't impact our budget to a tremendous extent next year, but it's something to note. And then going on to page 3, under local revenues, later on, the board will be asked to approve a new contract with the Up Valley Family Center in the amount of $120,000 because we're going to be adding some counseling time for next year, some bilingual support. And we also have been receiving Title IV student support funding, which is a new source for us. And we've learned that we can use these funds towards counseling, and so we'd like to apply those to the contract with Up Valley. Which means that we would probably need to charge approximately $30,000 to the unrestricted general fund to support our mental health counseling services. And then on page 3 at the bottom, another change there has to do with staffing. We have a vacant floating custodial grounds position, which was a position that the board approved about a year ago, and we will not be filling that until after the 2020-21 first interim report is presented to the board in December, because we want to see what the long-term impact is going to be on our district finances. And then on page 4, the next change to highlight there has to do with our transition program for special education students who are age 18 to 22. This is a program that we need to move towards providing our students to meet legal requirements and so forth. And we were planning on beginning that in 2020-21 in conjunction with Calistoga. But due to the event, we want to continue to plan for that, but push that out to 21-22. And so the budget reflects that. The next update I'd like to highlight for you is on page 6, and that has to do with the Aquatic Center. And due to school closure and the shelter in place, we've had the pool closed now for a couple of months. And so we will see some savings generated from that, which will help to mitigate some of our cost increases due to the event. And then finally on page 8, later this evening the board will be asked to approve a couple of contracts for some device refresh, Chromebooks for incoming 3rd and 6th graders, and for next year also adding 2nd graders to that as well, because we'd like the 2nd graders to begin practicing with those devices in preparation for entering the elementary school. Also, another update related to the COVID-19 event, we did purchase 60 wireless hotspots and licenses to go along with those hotspots, and we are getting some one-time state funding which will cover most of those costs. We also recently applied for and received some special grant funding that will give us a discount on about 50% of those licenses, so that'll save us around $5,000 to $6,000. So we can use that $5,000 to $6,000 from the one-time grant towards other expenses related to the COVID-19 event. Those are the main highlights that I wanted to discuss with you this evening on the budget assumptions, and it's presented for information only.
Thank you, Andy. Was there any public comment, Ms. Madrigal, on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
So, trustees, there's a lot of little changes. Are there any comments or questions?
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you for this. So my question is it wasn't what we covered, but it's always the question that we have about STRS and PERS increases. So does it seem, just from what we're hearing as far as, investments and everything, are they able to, have you heard of any more increases that might be coming in the next year due to, the stock market and all of that's what's going on?
Well, interestingly, the governor's May revise was released today at around noon, and there's an article in front of you there, a fiscal services update that talks about STRS and PERS. And we'll talk about that a little bit more with the subsequent budget item, but the state is planning to use other funding to apply towards those needed increases, and so that will relieve the districts of about 2%, I think, in 2021 and 21-22. Reducing those rates, so that'll generate some savings for the district, which is great. And so,
always good news. Jeff?
Yeah, I had a question, Andy, about these 60 wireless hotspots. Are we thinking that this is something that our district should envision, that we should reach out when they register and make sure that people have the ability to have wireless, and whether we should continue this for the foreseeable future, to give every child access? So I just hope that not only, I know we're looking at it one time, but maybe we can look at it to see what the future holds or how we're going to handle that in the future. Seems like it would be really a good use of our money. Thank you.
yes, and I would say that the general sense is that internet access has been an issue for some time in terms of equity and so forth, and especially in our more remote areas. And so I would suggest that this is kind of unearthed or put a greater emphasis on a need that's been there for a long time. And so I would say that this would be something that we need to sustain in our budget.
I also agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Lisa?
actually had similar thought process about that. So thank you for bringing that up, Trustee Conwell. And I think that's a great idea because it does, it does start to provide at least one platform of equity. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
So my question is more about, it's really small, the pools. I'm assuming that because we don't have the pool staffing, even though we don't have any income from pool use, we're still looking at a lower expenditure on the pool.
Yes, very much so.
So we're the staffing savings is greater than the income we would be getting from the pool use.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Sorry. Any other questions?
You know, this is my question. This is more kind of, it's a future, like a future question. Okay, so say, do we have wiggle room in our budget in order to accommodate possibly like an earlier start time of like calendar year for our students, like they're saying, as far as, possibly, earlier fall time starts? And then about like staggered start times where, where we might need additional teacher time and things?
Well, all those would certainly be negotiable items, and I would need to do a further cost analysis in terms of what that might look like.
Mm-hmm.
Those are negotiable items with every, I know the governor mentioned that, and every district would need to negotiate a different start date. And then Tony Thurmond, state superintendent, came out the other day and said that's not an expectation that we change our start date. But all things are on the table as we consider our options moving forward, and that'll be some of the things we talk about in the coming weeks of how next year looks and some of the different things that we're going to need to consider. So it's definitely a consideration.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So any further questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. And I have head shaking no from here. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andy, for that review. On to item 11B. This is the review of the transportation study conducted by Pupil Transportation Information. And we'll be getting that report from Pupil Transportation Information. And I'd like to call in Miss Andy Stubbs.
Thank you. The board some time ago commissioned a study with Pupil Transportation Information for a complete analysis of our transportation programs and some options moving forward because Napa Valley Unified is no longer able to contract with us beyond June 30th, 2020. And so the study and presentation is presented this evening, and it will be presented by Michael Ray of Pupil Transportation Information. And he indicated he was on the call.
Hello, I am here. And Erica, were you going to?
Yes, I will be advancing the slides on your direction.
Okay. I don't see the slides on my screen here. But I can just continue to talk if that's okay.
Just one moment.
Okay.
Can you see them now?
No. What I see is your screen that shows the agenda on, there we go. Now I see it. Okay. Well, honorable members of the board, Superintendent Wilson, CBO, Stubbs, we appreciate the opportunity to present this very brief discussion of our report. And if you could switch to the next slide. So the owner of Pupil Transportation Information is Tim Purvis. He is the Director of Transportation at Poway Unified School District. And Dr. Wilson, he apologizes, but he's got a board meeting tonight he needs to present at, so he couldn't be with us tonight. He formed Pupil Transportation Information because both Tim and I have been consultants for FCMAT for 25 years. And during the Great Recession, FCMAT was no longer able to do a lot of the management assistance requests that they were receiving. So they would refer them to their consultants. And Tim formed PTI to be able to do that work and to assist FCMAT. In addition to myself and Mr. Purvis, Donna Anderson was on site with us in February when we did the site work at both St. Helena and Calistoga school districts. And Donna Anderson recently retired from the State Department of Education's Office of School Transportation. She worked for, I believe, about 7 or 8 years for them. And previous to that, she was the director of MOT for Southern Humboldt Unified School District. You could switch to the next screen, please. So we contracted with the district in January 2020, and we were on site in February. And the agreement stated that we would look at the current contract with Napa Valley Unified School District, look at the needs of St. Helena relative to transportation, and look also at future potential options for providing the service. If you could switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the report, the written report, which I believe you have, board members, is broken down into 3 primary sections. In the current transportation services and costs, we looked at funding and finance, staffing, routing, and the number of students, the bus fleet or vehicle fleet, and also if there's any vehicle maintenance facilities, fueling facilities, things of that nature. We reviewed the current agreement with Napa Valley Unified School District, and we also looked at potential service delivery models going forward. Thank you, Erica. So the current transportation service that St. Helena Unified provides for its community consists of 3 primary routes for general ed transportation and some special ed transportation. Route T14 goes to Angwin, T15 Spanish Flat, and V26 serves town and some of the special ed students. On T14, there's approximately 55 students a day that ride, 27 on T15, and 10 on V26. There are some special ed students on T14 also, I believe. And there are a couple of special ed students that are transported to Sonoma County by a contract transportation provider called Zoom Services. Currently, the district has no dedicated transportation staff. Ms. Stubbs oversaw the interface between Napa Valley Unified and the service as well as Zoom Services. The district does own a 35-passenger special education bus with a wheelchair lift. The district also owns some vans, but does not operate a vehicle parking facility, vehicle maintenance facility, or has any real fueling capacity. So in this section of the report, we made some recommendations, and that was consider having a train driver transport special ed students to Sonoma County in a van. This could be a district employee that's trained and takes them over there. Zoom could potentially be expensive, but if the district does continue to use Zoom for this very limited purpose, we would recommend that the district enhance the contract with Zoom services relative to driver screening, driver training, vehicle maintenance, and potentially insurance coverage. One of the things that we were asked to do was look if there was a potential to consolidate the existing general education transportation service for the district. And there are a couple of ways that the district could do that. You could take route T14 and 15 and provide that service on a larger bus with students on the bus for a longer period of time. That, could be, as long as an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute ride time for some students that live the furthest away. And that would be a one-way ride time. Another thought that we had relative to that potential consolidation was to use one bus that would pick up one of the routes, let's say T14 first, bring those students into school, drop them off, go back out, do T15, and then bring them in later. That idea would require additional supervision time at the schools, and certainly there's some cost relative to that would offset any savings in transportation. And then the other recommendation that we had was placing any non-school bus vehicles that transport students on a regular preventive maintenance program similar to school buses. And that would help to reduce the potential liability for the school district in the long run. Erica, next slide, please. Thank you. So we looked at the current agreement with Napa Valley Unified School District. And frankly, twice in recent history, Napa Valley Unified School District has provided service for the district and then abandoned the service because of whatever reason they had at the time. Going forward, St. Helena cannot hope that Napa Valley Unified will put their cape on and come back to resurrect transportation service in the future. The agreement, however, has been extremely advantageous for St. Helena and for Calistoga, with generally low cost, full service, with Napa Valley taking care of all the legal and regulatory requirements. Now, this last year, in the 1920 school year, Napa Valley Unified didn't have enough drivers, so they had to contract with Michael's Transportation. That became very expensive for both St. Helena and Calistoga. And then in January, Napa Valley sent a letter to the district notifying them that they would not provide the service past June 30th. So again, Napa Valley has taken care of all of the regulatory requirements, and they've done a really good job. They've taken that burden off of the district for years. But again, we don't believe that it would be beneficial to be hopeful that at some point in time they would do that again for the district. Next slide, Erica. So we looked at potential delivery models and made some comments relative to them. So for the immediate future, because there's such a short timeline here and there aren't a lot of options, we recommended that the district lease some additional buses for the short term, contact Michael's Transportation for drivers, and I think you may have already wrapped up that action. And also contact Highway Patrol because the district will now become a motor carrier and has to go through the registration process with the Public Utilities Commission. Highway Patrol takes care of all of that stuff for you, but they also need to notify you of all your responsibilities. And then number two, in the future, really this is going to be work that's going to occur during this next school year. Again, do not hope or plan that Napa Valley Unified would be able to provide the service. One of the options that we looked at was the potential of going out to bid and contracting for service. A few years ago, when Napa Valley Unified was not able to provide the service, St. Helena and Calistoga were able to contract with First Student in Santa Rosa. First Student is no longer operating in Santa Rosa. Their closest operations are in Santa Fe or Concord or Richmond. And we don't believe that they would consider it reasonable to bid on such a small operation so far away. even when they were operating out of Santa Rosa, it was very challenging for them to be responsive to the needs of St. Helena and Calistoga. And then Andy Stubbs had contacted West County Transportation in Santa Rosa, and they had their own staffing issues and said that they just would not be able to provide any service. But frankly, again, being over in Santa Rosa, they're not going to be able to be very responsive to St. Helena and Calistoga in the long run. One of the options would be to provide service individually and separately from Calistoga Joint Unified School District. Although that's certainly a possibility, we're recommending that the districts look at working cooperatively because we think there are some benefits operationally and fiscally for St. Helena and Calistoga to operate together. One of the items that we were asked to look at was whether or not public transit could provide some of the service. And the Vine in Napa County does not really have enough infrastructure to provide that service. In St. Helena and separately in Calistoga, they have their local bus that's more of a dial-a-ride or on-demand type of service. So there's no fixed route in those communities. There's an Up Valley connector that comes up Highway 29, but their service is limited. Certainly the districts could talk with public transit, and in our report we go into a little bit more detail relative to why public transit probably would not be a good option for the district. Option number 5 there near the bottom is really our strongest recommendation, that either St. Helena or Calistoga takes responsibility for the program and contracts with the other district. There are a number of things that will need to occur for that to happen, but we think that providing the service cooperatively could provide some great benefits for both St. Helena and Calistoga. The last item that we looked at, option, was to form a joint powers agreement. And for such a small operation, it's probably overkill. If you did form a joint powers agreement, you could do it a couple ways. One, with a lead district operating the joint powers agreement. Essentially, that works the same as a lead contracting with another district, because the lead district would have all the budget of that agency embedded in their budget, would have to deal with all the personnel issues and operational responsibilities, frankly. If it was a standalone joint powers agreement, again, it would be a separate government agency, and that's probably too much for such a small operation. And then our next slide, Erica. So for in the future, in the report, we included a table of all the different responsibilities that should be included in the long term, whether St. Helena provides service to themselves or if there's some cooperative effort moving forward. And we had already mentioned contacting the Highway Patrol to register as a motor carrier, securing the service of a school bus driver instructor. That's really the lifeblood of any school transportation operation. If you don't have somebody that's licensed to train school bus drivers, then you're not going to have school bus drivers and you're not going to have a school transportation operation. So we have some options that are listed in the report relative to that. Securing an appropriate number of school buses. There's a discussion of that in the report. Developing a communication system, more than likely a two-way communication system. And that may be in conjunction with a city or county system that's available. I know in operations that I've been oftentimes school districts work in conjunctions with city and counties. The district would need to register and become a tester for the federal drug and alcohol testing program. They would also need to register with the DMV, their employer pull notice program. It's a requirement for commercial transportation operations that would provide the employer with a copy of the driver's record annually and upon any activity, such as a moving violation. Research and select a vehicle maintenance provider. There are several options that we outline in the report, and also secure parking and office space and fueling capability for the operation. So that concludes the elements of the report. Again, it's at a very, very high level. Are there any questions that the board or administration has for me at this time?
First, was there any public comment on this agenda item, Erica?
There was no public comment.
Thank you. Trustees?
I can start. Hello, Michael?
Yes, go ahead.
First off, thanks for the report. That was very thorough, 40 pages, but it was definitely very informative and kind of I was glad to kind of see the outline and just understand more so what it takes to do a project like this. I had a question regarding if we did decide to go with the cooperative transportation like you're recommending, with one district being the lead. Because I know neither district has the infrastructure for the fueling, and I think you mentioned the parking and the office space. Like, what does that kind of entail, or how does that look as far as the cost and space and et cetera? If you can give any further details.
Well, we didn't do a lot of exploration in that area. We did have conversation with Mr. Perez, with Mrs. Stubbs. There are some potential options there, including the corporation yard for the city of St. Helena. Someone had mentioned that St. Helena Catholic Elementary School had closed, and there was a rather large paved area there, which used to be their playground. I don't know that that's a great option because it seems to be in a residential area, probably not a great place for an industrial space. Right now, some buses occasionally are parked at the CAL FIRE location north on Highway 29. So there are some potential options there, but it's not something that we covered in great detail in the report.
Any further questions? So I just actually had a comment. I was one of the proponents of looking at the public transportation, and actually in the current environment, since we don't really know what's going to be happening with public transportation, I understand that it really doesn't look like a hybrid solution would work either. So I no longer am pushing to look into how we can bring public transportation routes into our services. So just putting that out there, everything changes so drastically. And then we're also, do we really know what school bus transportation is going to look like when school starts up again in the fall? Do you know of any regulations that there's going to be, or is that something we have to consider as well when we're moving forward?
We will absolutely need to consider our reopening plans, and then transportation will be informed by those. And so as we come to know the rules about coming back to school, then we will update our transportation plans accordingly.
What I'm possibly wondering is there going to be possibly state limits as to how many students can be on a bus at a time, and would that impact what our needs would be.
I imagine so, and Mike may have additional information here. I haven't seen any of those guidelines yet.
And thank you, Andy. The State Department of Education, as well as their Office of School Transportation, is working on guidance that will eventually come out to school districts in the state. We have not seen that yet. And Andy, I don't know, did Tim send you a copy of the report and suggestions that we as PTI did relative to considerations for reopening?
I don't believe I've seen that. I can check with Tim certainly tomorrow.
Okay. Well, we had put something together, and, you know, of course it's generic and things change dramatically, and, you know, nobody really knows what things are going to look like. But if there's still a requirement to social distance a minimum of 6 feet away, you could take an 84 passenger bus, and by implementing reasonable protocols, it would bring the capacity of that bus down to 14. So there are some really strong considerations to be made in the long run as to whether or not transportation will even work appropriately.
I was curious, which I'm sure that probably has not happened yet, but Andy, have you had any conversations with Calistoga since this report findings have come out, or not as of yet, would be my first question. And then secondly, I too had the same thought process as Julio in reading that report about parking and refueling, because I think those are really big considerations for us for the long haul picture. So it sounds like there will need to be definite, further discussion on that, on the recommendation if we go that way. So that's my comment and one question.
Yes, and so I do know that PTI presented the same information to the Calistoga board recently, and the CBO and I have only had very high-level conversations about the information. There's an interest on both parts as far as staff goes of pursuing something jointly. And that's as far as we've taken the conversation there. With regard to parking and fueling, I do, in fact, just today I circled back with somebody at CAL FIRE because they have indicated that we could potentially park buses there. They just needed some more details. And then I had reached out to a couple other local, the city of St. Helena. We've had some very high-level initial discussions about possible parking, and there's a couple of other possibilities out there too. As far as office space, that was another thing that was mentioned, and my plan, because even if we were to do something jointly with Calistoga, we would still be looking at about 4 routes, and so I don't know that we would need a large dispatch office or that kind of thing. I think we could absorb that within one of the districts. And with regard to fueling, a lot of that depends on the type of the bus that we eventually purchase. And the fueling piece is something that I need to research a little bit more.
You know, and I was actually thinking about the kind of the recruiting, training, and hiring of bus drivers as well. I mean, I don't know, we're in such a small market. Is that, Michael, in your experience, is it difficult to recruit bus drivers and get bus drivers on board?
Well, it's typically a challenge to find people to want to be school bus drivers. It's usually relatively low pay, high responsibility, part-time, split shift. But all of a sudden, there are a lot of unemployed people in the world who might be interested in being school bus drivers. So you never know.
Tim had also indicated when we were having some early discussions about all this that it might not be as difficult as I might think to hire drivers just because of where we're geographically located, and there could be some people living locally for whom that was a good work choice.
And I didn't hear everything that you said, Andy, but In many small school districts that have a small transportation operation, combining jobs and creating greater opportunity for employees oftentimes works very well. So someone that might be interested in being a school bus driver, there might also be work in food service or as a classroom aide or campus aide. So combining some of those responsibilities typically works well to provide greater employment for those individuals and some security that would keep people around. You may have some of those people already in your district.
So I would be asking this to you, Andy. We have currently our bus is diesel, is it, or correct?
Yes.
And do we know what type of fuel Calistoga's current buses are?
I believe they're diesel. Mike, can you confirm that?
Yes, they are diesel.
So then would you be recommending that we stick with all one type of fuel, I'm assuming, correct, for efficiency?
Well, typically that would be a good plan. There are, bus replacement grants out there for older buses, which you don't have any of those, but there's all kinds of technology now beyond gasoline and diesel for fueling vehicles. But diesel certainly is relatively clean and is available.
I just know that there have been a lot of buses that were running on hydrogen fuel, but that would be very difficult, I think, to find a motor pool area where we could have a vehicle like that up Valley here. I don't know of any services available for that type of vehicle. So would the recommendation be to stick with diesel, I'm assuming?
Well, for in the short term, probably diesel is a good option, and it'll just make it easier for you moving forward. But you have an option and an opportunity moving forward to look at other things, because if you're going to lease buses in this first year, you have a year to be able to explore other things. And for example, propane has become a relatively popular fuel again for motor vehicles. Well, propane companies will come and deliver you a fueling facility. So there's different options and different ways to look at this in the long run.
The buses that I'm proposing that we lease temporarily are older diesel buses, with the idea being that we would research the best buses to purchase long term should the board choose to go that route, and make a decision about fueling types and so forth then.
Thank you. Any other questions, trustees?
Not at this time. Thank you for the very, very thorough report. It was really great. So I appreciated having all that information. The combining of the routes is, certainly not ideal. And I don't think we really know what the cost savings is on that, because we also would have additional add-on expenses, if I'm reading everything correctly, if we would need additional supervision. That's a long extra time for students to sit on a bus, I realize. So thank you for pointing out all that time involved in that for our students. So I guess that's not really a question. I apologize. It was just more commentary. So thank you.
Julio, any final comments? I'd just like to... Okay. Thank you, Julio.
No more questions. Thank you.
I'd just like to thank you, Mr. Ray, and the entire PTI team for this really thorough, helpful report that you did for us.
Thank you.
Now we're moving on to item 11C, which will be a review and consideration of approval for a transportation plan for the 2020-2021 school year.
Thank you. And based on the information that you've heard, I prepared a recommendation just for the 2021 school year as a temporary bridge year to give us time to develop a long-term plan. And in this recommendation has two parts. First of all, I would recommend that we continue providing transportation services at the current level, adjusting as necessary based on school reopening needs resulting from the COVID-19 event. Temporary staffing will be provided by Michael's Transportation, and the board has already approved a contract for that staffing, and that can be adjusted based on need. And that the district would lease 2, and I would be recommending 3 buses so that we had a spare for the 2020-21 school year. And we can talk a little bit more about the leasing of the buses. The second part of the recommendation is that district staff would develop a long-term transportation plan for 21, 22, and beyond using district staffing and purchasing buses in possible collaboration with the Calistoga Joint Unified School District. And then we would be presenting a long-term plan to the board ideally in January or February of 2021. And I think that if the board considers continuing transportation for another year at the same level, it's already in the current budget, and it would be the least impactful model to our families and to our students. Recognizing, though, that of course there are still a lot of unknowns in terms of what reopening is going to look like and how we get students from home to school and back again. We would want to make sure that we had what we needed to serve them. And then pending approval of the recommended plan, the board would be asked to consider approval of a contract with AZ Busing for 1-year leases.
Thank you, Andy. Was there any public comment on this agenda item?
There was no public comment.
Trustees, any further questions?
No questions.
Yeah, no, I'm more of a comment than anything else. I think this is such a big issue for our district and for Calistoga and Up Valley because we just don't have options. And that's really what that report told us, is we have no options. And we're making the best as we can for the next year. That I'm afraid that this is going to impact our operations department very much like a facilities bond. It's going to be something that's going to be out there, and there's going to be a lot of thought and a lot of ideas, and so I just kind of, as a public person, thinking about it, and there's just, because there's so few options and all of them are going to become potentially great expense, and hopefully we can partner with Calistoga. I think that's a great thing. This currently, I think what you've got as a recommendation for this upcoming year is fantastic. I mean, that's what we've got, and it makes a lot of sense. But I think it will be it will impact a lot of staff time to kind of figure out the next transportation level, and yet we still don't even know about COVID-19 and how that's going to impact our transportation. It could be that there might be something different that happens out there that through COVID-19 we might not be able to provide all that. So anyway, it's just I think it's just a more of a warning than anything else. I think it's going to be very impactful on the operations staff. So, but I do think the recommendation is sound and makes a lot of sense for today.
You know, that's exactly what I was going to say as well. As I feel very comfortable with the plan for 2021, and I want to thank you for your just your thoughtfulness on this and all your research and things that you've done, you and your team on this. I think for me right now, just because of everything happened, I think it is really important that we continue busing to keep things as normal as we can, so to say. And I agree with Jeff. Who knows what it's going to really look like at the end of the day, or in August, for that matter. And the one thing that reading the report, it was very comprehensive, and it really makes you realize really how much is involved in the whole process of public transportation or transporting our students. There's a lot more that that I didn't even know about it, and it was very eye-opening. So I very much appreciate that report, and I thank you for having that team put that together for us. It was very good. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank People Transportation Information. They were great to work with and and brought a lot of expertise and knowledge to it.
Yeah, thank you.
Julio and Lisa, any comments, questions?
I just
Go ahead, Julio.
Okay, mine is short. Yeah, also just in agreement with Jeff as far as how it is going to be challenging moving forward outside of the COVID-19 and those recommendations. But even moving forward, I just think that ultimately, if it is going to take more time and more money to invest, and hopefully we'll be able to work with Calistoga. But ultimately, if it'll be something that we'll set in place and that we can basically build to serve not just our students but Calistoga, since we have similar routes and everything and so forth. So I just want to say thank you to Andy as well and her team as far as the work that's gone into it. Obviously for next year we're kind of covered, but definitely moving forward it is going to be challenging. But I think at the end of the day we want to be able to provide that service to our students, and so like I said, that hopefully it'll all work out. But for now it does make it more complicated with the COVID-19 stuff, just because we don't know what's going to happen. So thank you for that work.
The best part about going last is you can say ditto to all the above. But I do agree when, as Trustee Conwell was speaking, he definitely, it struck a chord with me about the future. But I love the solution for the next year so that we can have the least amount of interruption. So again, thank you to everybody for all your work.
And again, I would also like to echo that I think your recommendation, Andy, is really prudent in the drafting, where you brought in that we're going to have to be flexible with regarding the COVID-19 event. And I really feel that the team and the research that has gone into this subject, we're going to have to adapt to whatever is going to be coming. I can't imagine that our 84 passenger bus will only be able to hold 14 students. That's going to, I don't know if that's going to be a reality, but we have to be able to adapt. And I think that the recommendation is able to encompass all the things that we have to consider going forward, and I'm very comfortable with it as well. So do I have a motion to approve the transportation plan for the 2020-2021 school year as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the transportation plan for the 2021 year as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Wilson, there's a roll call.
Trustee Browdy?
Aye.
Trustee Conwell?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye. Motion carried. Approval of contracts over $25,000. I'd like to call on Miss Andy Stubbs.
Thank you. We have a few this evening. The first two are with Dell, and these are for device refresh. We need to purchase some new laptops for our incoming 9th graders. And then the second is for Chromebooks, and we would like to purchase new Chromebooks for our incoming 3rd graders and 6th graders. And then in addition, for the first time next year, we want to purchase a set for our 2nd graders so that they can begin using those devices and becoming familiar with them before they go on to the elementary school. And so you can see the estimated cost there. These expenses live in our proposed budget for 2020-21, and it's part of our annual device refresh. And then the next contract, this would be for a not-to-exceed amount of $70,000 for flooring replacement at St. Helena Elementary School, rooms 1 through 5. And some time ago, the board approved conceptually a flooring replacement project at the elementary school, and we had the longer lists about a year ago of different facilities projects. And so this has come up as being a high priority. We did receive a quote from J.P. Jordan to do this work, and it came in below $70,000, but we wanted to put it out to some other bidders and see if we could get something even more competitive. But we'd like to get going on that work as soon as we can in June. And so for that reason, the board this evening is asked to approve a not-to-exceed amount of $70,000, and then we would bring back the actual contract on consent during the June board meeting. And then the next one is with School and College Legal Services, and this would be our annual retainer agreement. They've had a bit of a rate increase of $15 per hour compared with 1920 rates. The next is for Up Valley Family Centers of Napa Valley. We talked about that a little bit with the budget assumptions. The amount that we're proposing for next year is $120,000, which is an increase of $8,000 compared with current year, and that will add some additional hours of bilingual counseling support. And the funding source information that you see there aligns with what you saw in the budget assumptions. And that is built into the 2020-21 original budget that you'll see in the next board item. And then finally, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the bus lease agreement. Tim Purvis of Pupil Transportation Information was very helpful in terms of identifying some of the bus sales companies that will lease buses for a period of time. Many of them won't. And so I worked with a rep at AZ Bus Sales, and they are willing to lease us 3 pre-owned 84-passenger diesel engine school buses for next year with some very favorable terms. And the terms are described in the agenda item. The buses will be leased for an initial period of 6 months, beginning in May, but the first 3 months are free. And then after August 15th, the monthly cost is $3,500 per bus for a total of $10,500 a month. After the 6-month period ends, then the lease converts to a month-to-month term. And a portion of the lease payments can be applied towards the purchase of these buses if optioned by the district. And the idea there is that we would want to procure 3 buses in case, so that we can be at the ready. Depending on what happens with the COVID-19 event, we're ready to transport all students per usual, the way that we're doing now, and we would have those buses available. We would have the 2 plus a spare. We've talked with Calistoga Joint Unified to see if we could potentially use their spare if something were to happen, but unfortunately they need to ensure that they have theirs available if something happens for their buses, so they're not able to enter into that kind of agreement at this time. And then, of course, during those 6 months, we would be researching bus purchasing options in alignment with whatever level of services the board should approve for 21, 22, and beyond. And so with that, I would ask the board to consider approving the contracts over $25,000, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Matrical, was there any public comment on these items?
There was no public comment.
Board members? Any comments or questions?
No questions.
I have 2 no shakes here. Julio?
No questions. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And actually, I do have a question, Ms. Stubbs. The spare bus, is that a bus that we could potentially use for field trips or sporting transportation to to sports competitions?
Absolutely. I considered that would then be available for, and that would depend, of course, on, we would be using Michael's drivers, but that could be one of our field trip options. And in fact, all the buses with the contracted drivers could potentially be available for field trips, at least within the school day. And certainly the spare could be used after.
One aspect I'm wondering as well, it just occurred to me, so we're going to be contracting with Michael's Transportation, correct?
Correct.
For the drivers, and A to Z for the, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then there are, actually, I just realized, we were talking about availability of drivers. As long as this is going on, there are a lot of transportation drivers here in the valley that are no longer able to drive the buses that go to the wineries, because all of those companies have laid off their staff. So there might actually be availability of experienced multi-passenger transportation drivers in the valley. So at least starting out. Okay. So is there any public comment? I'm sorry. Is there a motion to approve contracts over $25,000 as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Wilson will call the roll.
Trustee Browdy?
Aye.
Trustee Conwell?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee O'Keen?
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye. Motion carried. Now on to the most exciting item on the agenda.
I always think so.
I'd like to call on Ms. Andy Stubbs for the draft 2020-2021 original budget board review and public hearing.
Thank you. And as Chris talked about earlier this evening, per Executive Order number 5620, the public hearing today is just for the budget and not for the LCAP also. And then the board will be legally required to adopt the district budget before July 1st of this year. And so on this slide, we see the different sources of information that went into preparing the 2020-21 original budget. And we will be able to file a positive certification for 2020-21 and the subsequent 2 fiscal years. And then this slide here just provides a snapshot of the timeline for our annual financial reporting. And right now what you see highlighted is the 2021 original budget, and that's what we're talking about this evening. And so because of all of our unusual circumstances right now, it's important for us to take a little bit of a look behind us so that we can look ahead. Back in December, when I presented to you the 2019-20 first interim report, we had a bit of a structural deficit in the budget that we saw, and that resulted from increases that came through with negotiations that were board approved. We had a larger deficit in 1920 because we also have the one-time PERS and STRS retirement incentive that we're paying off. If we didn't have that, then we would be solidly in the black in 2019-20. And then with the first interim, we recognized that in the out years, we're budgeting for our conservative 3% property tax growth, and we developed a tax increase allocation plan whereby we anticipated that if property taxes came in higher, we would earmark those funds for some different programs and so forth as listed there. For example, providing support for potentially resource officer, budgeting for the future-ready classrooms above the line once again, increasing our contribution to support our facilities needs, and setting aside some dollars for when our Kaiser grant is gone, so that we can continue to support field trips and pay student fees and so forth. Then, with the 2019-20 second interim that was presented to the board in March, we saw some changes, and so relatively small changes that were captured in the second interim. We were still basing our property tax growth on the J29P1 report that we received in November. And so if you look at the pink line there, which shows a projected deficit just on the unrestricted side of the house, which is the side that we care about the most with regard to our finances, you can see that it changed a little bit compared with first interim. And so this brings us to present day, and now we're looking at the 2020-21 original budget report. And we've received some news since the second interim, and we received our J29P1 property tax report, and you can see that we got a rather large increase of $727,000. And so this resulted from some new property assessments, some, looking at my wording there, revisiting some roll corrections, many of them going back several years. And for example, there were two local large wineries that had some large roll corrections. And the county treasury and the county office of education is always very conservative in their budgeting of school district property taxes at P1, but we haven't seen that large of a bump since I've been here, certainly, maybe $30,000 between P1 and P2, or sometimes even there's a little bit of a decrease. And then maybe a small change too when we get to the final report in August for our property taxes. So this was a pleasant surprise for certain, and what it did was it allowed us to go ahead and implement that allocation plan that we talked about back in December with the P1, where we set aside some of those funds for some of the programs that we want to do. And so here we see listed, it's the same financial picture that you saw in the previous slide. So we have now a surplus in 2020-21 of $542,000, approximately 21-22, a surplus on the unrestricted side of the house of about $60,000, and so on. And of course, we're adding 2022-23, so adding that additional year that we haven't seen yet, because now we're looking at a multi-year projection for starting in 2020-21. And then we have all the assumptions listed below. We've talked about the special education transition program and the fact that that was a legally required program, and so we were moving a little bit faster with that and planning on starting that next year. With the COVID-19 event, we've determined that it would be best in conjunction with Calistoga to begin that in 21-22. And so we've pulled that out of the 2020-21 budget and moved it to 21-22. Chris and Mary did a great job of really going through very carefully our professional development expenses and finding ways that we can make some reductions next year, particularly due to the COVID-19 event. And so we went through, we made those changes, but we also left a little bit of a placeholder for some unexpected expenses related to distance learning, for example. We have a placeholder beginning in 2021 to fill the floating custodian grounds vacancy. So what we want to do is hold that position and not fill it yet in 2020-21, so that's pulled out of the budget in that year, but then brought back in 21-22, again, because of the increase that we saw with the property taxes. And then we build back in those placeholders, as you can see, to support programs such as the Future Ready Classrooms and or a resource officer, and then also backfilling the one-time Kaiser grant funding, which is currently covering some field trip support and providing for our wellness goals. So this is a beautiful budget. It's a balanced budget. We're building back in some of the programs that we had, and we have the COVID-19 event. And so certainly that's going to be impacting our budget, and I'd like to talk about that for a little bit. So As events have been unfolding, I've asked the County Office of Education to provide us with kind of a small common message that addresses the impact of COVID-19 on the Napa County community-funded basic aid school districts. And so what they have indicated is that while we'll be fine for 2021, we could see a downward assessment of properties that could begin impacting property tax revenues in 2021 and 22 and beyond. And so it's very recommended that school districts at a very minimum consider running some multi-year planning scenarios that project 0% growth in 21, 22, and 22, 23. And we already budget pretty conservatively at 3%. You may recall during the Great Recession that property taxes, I think in maybe 08, 09, dipped below 3%. And so it would be very prudent of us to begin looking at how some of these scenarios may play out for us. So my proposal is that beginning next year with our Business Operations Committee, we'll want to have monthly meetings, and that could look like our quarterly meetings that we have this year, and then additional meetings with a smaller ad hoc group that would really look closely at our financials and develop a mitigation plan should we need something in the out years. And so we would do that in collaboration with the Board of Trustees, of course, and in collaboration with the bargaining units. And the plan would be to try and take a look at things that stayed as far away from the classroom as possible. So temporary adjustments to contributions to facilities and things of that nature. The next couple of slides show just some of the mechanical assumptions that go into building the multi-year projection. You've seen these before. Shows the property tax amounts, the percent increases that we're budgeting. And so again, this multi-year projection shows a 3% growth in each of the 3 years for property taxes. It shows the information from our local control funding formula calculator that's aligned with the LCAP. And then we've made some adjustments based on the information that we do know today about finances related to the COVID-19 event. And so for us as a basic aid district, where we get to retain our what's called excess property taxes, we're not as impacted, at least not immediately, as you saw in the previous slide. But we do get some funding, for example, $481,000 in state aid that you saw in the budget assumptions that will be potentially impacted. Additionally, I pulled out the budget for some additional special education funding that we were slated to receive, and I'm not planning on any COLAs or any other increases for Title I and programs like that. We did learn that we've received about $181,000 in some federal relief funding. That's one-time money that we'll be able to use for some any unrestricted purpose. And so as more information comes to us, we are evaluating that and in alignment with our particular situation. And I'm planning each month now to bring the board an update on these matters. And then these are some assumptions related to our expenditures. Now, of course, this new information on the May revise was just released today, and so I haven't added in those reductions to STRS and PERS yet, but you'll certainly see those in the June budget that the board will be asked to consider approving. One other one that I wanted to point out there. With the step and column increases, we've been budgeting about a 1% growth for step and column for classified, but in my analysis recently, it really is closer to 2% now because we've got some newer staff, and so they're making progress on the salary schedule. And then part of that net 2% that we're budgeting for step and column for certificated and classified also takes into account attrition and so forth over the years. And then here's some supplemental information about the COVID-19 event. I'm tracking the impact on our expenses and our savings. And so, for example, we've talked about the wireless hotspots. We've also had to purchase some new online licenses to support distance learning. We've added some counseling time to support staff. We have had to spend more in terms of staff overtime in alignment with our negotiated MOUs with our bargaining units. But we have also realized some unanticipated savings. So, for example, we don't have the same substitute costs. We talked a little bit about pool closure. That's generated some savings. And so in that monthly report, I'll address some of these changes in the budget and then also provide the board with a fuller report associated with our 2019-20 unaudited actuals in September.
Andy, can you stop for just one moment, please?
Yes.
We're experiencing some technical difficulties.
So I need to catch a breath anyway. No, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you. So the next steps, we talked about the may revise a little bit. So the budget that you see in June that you will approve will have a few changes. And there is the article that's in front of you, and I highlighted some of the areas that are important for us. The local control funding formula, which all districts use now, is facing a reduction of about 10%. That doesn't impact us so much directly, but it will impact us in with regard to the state aid. And the article also references the STRS and PERS reductions, about 2% in terms of cost in 2 years. And so that's good news. So while we're concerned about the budget, there's also a little bit of good news as well. There is a learning loss mitigation budget that is being proposed of about $4.4 billion to support districts in relation to the event, and so more to come, and we will present more information for you with the June adoption. And with that, I would ask if the board had any questions.
Was there any public comment, Erica, on this question?
This item is a public hearing item,
Oh, okay.
so there are specific instructions.
Oh, okay. So we actually are opening a public hearing now, and I will use a coffee cup. So, as permitted by the executive order issued by the Governor of the State of California, members of the public are asked to submit all comments related to the public hearing of the 2020-2021 original budget by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 13th, 2020. I will now open the hearing at 8:13 p.m. Were there any comments received in the public hearing of the 2020-2021 original budget?
There were no comments submitted on this agenda item.
I will now close the hearing at 8:14 p.m. Do the trustees have any questions about this agenda item? Jeff?
You know, Ms. Stubbs, it was pretty funny, your word to describe this budget as a beautiful item. And I don't know if Trustee Kerr can remember back to when we first got on this board. There's always a difference between P1 and P2 in our property taxes. And I remember when I was a new board member, I was like, golly, why are we spending so much? Why are we spending so much? And then honestly, for the first 2 or 3 years, it was like a champ. We got an extra $500,000, almost $1 million, and it was like, wow, okay, all right, we're all good. And then 1 year it didn't happen. And the year it didn't happen, I was just like, oh my God. So I appreciate that it doesn't exist. We should take it just like you're doing. You're taking advantage of all the opportunities for the district to move forward on it, but be wise with it, because we don't think it's going to, best not to think it's going to happen again. And especially, certainly with this crisis that we've got going on out there, things are going to change and we can't foresee anything, but the best thing we can be doing is having that money and being ready and mindful for it. So with that, I also agree it is a beautiful budget. And I'm so pleased that we did the payment, our big one-time lump sum, even though it looked ugly all year long. It was the wise thing to do, and it was, and kudos to you and your team for making it all happen. And I don't want to say necessarily taking that risk, but making that was the best choice for the district to pay it out anyway, and figure out how we're going to come up with it, because we were going to lose interest on it, and it would have been a negative factor for us. So I really appreciate that kind of forward thinking with that road picture of looking down the road. And there are times when we have to make decisions that probably right in front of the car might seem a little strange, but around the bend there might be something that works for us. So I'm very pleased with the budget. Thank you.
Julio or Lisa?
No questions. I just listened to Andy talk and I see all the, fabulous stuff. And I just was like, she's a wizard. It's just amazing. So thank you for always making it so, it's a lot, but it's compact. And I feel, confident. And Jeff has made a lot of great comments there as well tonight. So thank you as always, Andy.
Thank you.
Julio?
As Trustee Pelosi would say, ditto. So yeah, thank you, Andy, for all the work that you've done. And yeah, Jeff pretty much covered most of my sentiments as far as what she's been doing, not just this year, but as far as the time that I've been a trustee. So thank you for your clear vision thinking and then just laying it out, more understandable for the trustees. Thank you.
Jeannie, did you have something?
Yeah, no, the same thing, and at this point it was the P2 was quite a gift for us this year. It was nice, and it's going to help us going forward too. So it's a relief. Yeah, a relief right now anyway. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I also could say ditto. I was just wondering, under examples of unanticipated savings, did we receive deposits back from our large field trips, such as fifth grade camp and the eighth grade Yosemite trip?
We did. If I recall, I believe for the Yosemite trip, and Mary Lou can perhaps help me, we carried that, we held that as a credit over?
Correct. So the monies that were paid this year will be used for the next school year, and the monies that parents paid towards the trip were refunded to the current students.
Thank you. Thank you. So, then that is it. We're moving on to future agenda items. Item 12A. We have quite a lot of work on the June 18th regular board meeting.
President Haug, we will also add a number 19, which would be the self-evaluation discussion and review in the event that the content is returned to us in a timely fashion and we have it available.
Yes, thank you. Any suggestions for future agenda items? Board members?
No.
No, I have nothing. This is plenty.
So actually, I was going to ask the board, at some point we're going to be getting directives from the State Department of Education, the California State Department of Education. Does the board feel that we should have some sort of a workshop when those guidelines come out? Do you feel that it would be enough to just read them as they are forwarded to us independently? We're really moving into unknown territory with the COVID-19 situation, and I was wondering if we get something from the State Department of Education as far as guidelines moving forward for the next school year. It possibly could come early, but I don't think it would be coming by the June 18th board meeting. How does the board feel about having some sort of a special meeting where we review these guidelines so we understand them?
I would support that.
And maybe we could make it provisional in that we could, once the guidelines come out, if the guidelines are clear cut and we feel that there might not be many questions, we could play it by ear and see whether we need to have a meeting or not. How does the rest of the board feel about that?
President Haug, if I might also add just to the update on information, please be assured that staff is already beginning to strategize and develop models for moving forward, although we don't know what the rules are at this time. In addition, we do have some content that gives us guidelines around different departments and the kinds of task forces and work that needs to be accomplished to bring our students back into the classroom. We do have an emergency team. It's been very busy over the last number of years, and that team is made up of executive cabinet members, our principals, our directors, board president, union leadership from both classified and teachers union, technology, all different departments, and we will be convening the emergency team effective on Monday again to start the conversation and start the thinking around what our next steps are. So we will be in process even as quickly as Monday, and we'll continue to update you as we have more information.
So I guess where I would like to say is when the administration feels that they have a package that they want to put together, it's actually a plan that they've created from whatever the state gives us. If they feel that it's best communicated via newsletter or anything, or if they think a special session is warranted, then I think certainly for most of us this summer is, we all know, is basically going to be, we're all going to be around here anyway, so it's not, I think we can pretty much plan on any time. I am willing to come, if I'm of course here, to any sort of a special meeting, but I think it would be based on when the administration feels that they have a plan that they are willing to present to us as to how it's going to run at that time.
Yes, exactly. I think you phrased it a lot better than I was. I was trying to impart the fact that this is really, we're walking into the unknown. I don't want to mandate that we have a meeting, but it really should be left up to the administration based on what the guidelines are and the plan is, how we move forward, as to whether it would be useful to have an additional meeting before the start of the school year next year. So we'll just remind be open to that possibility? Lisa, Julio, are you open to that?
Yeah, I would say was going to like revise or edit my commentary slightly, and Jeff took the words out of my mouth as well. That I trust that Dr. Wilson and her team will put together what we need to know, whether it's in the written form, in a meeting form, whatever it might be. I think they're the ones on the ground, getting the information daily, weekly. So they're going to be the ones to, I don't have, what am I trying to say? I don't lack any faith in that we're going to get to the information that when we need to know it.
Perfect. So we'll all be flexible as we need to be at this time. Do I have item 13, adjournment? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Wilson will call the roll.
Trustee Browdy?
Aye.
Trustee Conwell?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye. Motion carried. Meeting ends at 8:26 p.m.